Okay, so welcome to the video. First of all, before we get into anything else, big congratulations to Toulouse for lifting the Champions Cup trophy at the weekend. Absolutely deserved winners. And the same as well the last 2 years for La Rochelle. This is not a video about how Leinster should have won or anything like that. They were, three occasions they were beaten by the better team. And anyone who kind of says different, I think, is living in denial. This is more a video about my thoughts on where Leinster have been the last kind of few years, and it's a video that almost never got made because since Saturday I've changed my mind. I don't know how many times, probably 100 times. I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it, I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it. And then finally, this morning, I decided I'm not going to make it. So I planned that today, right now, I was going to do the URC preview of round 18, the final round of the regular season. And then I realized, Leinster are playing first. Guess what my brain is going to do? It's going to hijack that video and maybe make half of the comments that I'm going to make here anyway. So I decided that wouldn't be the right thing to do. I want to basically compartmentalize this bit because it's not my normal video. We're not going to have any graphics. We're not going to have any stats or facts or anything in this probably. It's just going to be speaking from the heart, and it's just something I feel like I've got to get out because otherwise it's going to affect my other videos, and I don't want to do that. I want to give it its own little place and let it sit there, and that's it. So, from the point of view of this video, if that doesn't sound like something you want to watch, I'm happy for you to just skip it and watch another video or never come back again, whichever is best for you. But that's what this is going to be. And so here we are, right? And the reason again is so I can get just this stuff out of my system. But I have made a deal with myself. There's another video that I've been promising for a very long time, which is pretty much the opposite of this video in terms of it's going to be very rational, at least I hope so. Very rational. It's going to be full of facts. It's going to be full of stats, and it's going to be very well structured. This video is just going to be a wander as we kind of chat together. I don't know how long it's going to be. I have some notes to kind of guide me a little bit, but it's not going to be anywhere near scripted or anything like that, or most of the videos aren't, but like the one next week will be a scripted video. So, but my promise to myself was that I've been promising that video for a very long time, and the deal is I get to make this video only if I commit to releasing that audio video next week, which means that I'm gonna have 4 days off over like the weekend and into next week. And pretty much every spare minute, or most of the spare, let's not go overboard, but most of my spare time in those 4 days off is basically dedicated to finishing that video and getting it up and getting it posted and just saying, there you go, here it is, enjoy it. I hope you do. So that's kind of the deal I've made with myself. So back to this then. I said this video, it's not going to be as logical as my normal videos, and it's going to be a bit ranty. It's going to be lots of conjecture, speculation. It's going to be speaking from the heart, not the head. There's going to be very few facts involved in this as well. So you have been warned, okay, about what's going to be in this. So we said all that. Let's dive into the most important question of this video, and that is, should Leo Cullen go? Because I've seen in the comments on my video for the Champions Cup final a few people saying maybe it is time for Leo to step down and give somebody else a try and see what happens from there. Personally, I'm not sure about that, honestly. And, first thing is, who's going to replace him? Like, we don't have someone lined up who's going to come in and who's definitely going to be better, do a better job than Leo Cullen. And, so for me, that would be the first thing is, what's the plan? You can't just say, well, Leo's not working, out you go. It's not like Leinster are in the position that Ulster were early on in the season, where it was so clear that a change had to be made. Like, Leo Cullen has gotten us to 3 Champions Cup finals in a row, and we've lost each by like a hair's breadth, and if we was doing a bad job, we would be going out in round of 16, quarterfinals, pool stages, possibly not even qualifying for the Championship Cup. And now people say, "Oh, look at what Leinster have in terms of their players, etc." But a lot of that is down to Leo Cullen, the years he's been there. I'm old enough, and I'm a Leinster fan long enough, and to remember when it wasn't a thing where Leinster went deep into Europe every year. We were the province that looked on at Munster and were jealous about how they were able to do so well in the Heineken Cup. So, and a lot of that improvement, and especially the sustained improvement. It's not just a case of being, a team like, say, a Toulon or someone who comes along for a few years and is at the top. He's kept us at the top for so many years. Yes, we haven't won a trophy in a while, but, again, we've been so close. And so, but as well with Leo, I have a theory on that. Again, I told you it's all going to be speculation and stuff and no facts in this video. So we'll come back to the theory at the end of the video. But I've basically got a theory about Leo, that for me, the situation seems to fit that speculation. And again, it is just absolute pulling it out of the air kind of crap, right? But let's talk about what are my thoughts on the current state of Leinster. So when I talk about that, I basically talk about the last few years of Leinster. So let's start with the positives. Again, made 3 Champions Cup finals on the trot. And, who knows when we're going to make our next final? There could be a long, long wait for that. So for me, the fact that I get to watch my team in a final, yes, we lost 3 times. I still enjoy those games as rugby games, and I still enjoy the fact that I got to cheer my team on in that final, and I get to see them playing in the final. And again, we don't know when the next time Leinster, they could get there next year, absolutely. But it could be 5 years, 10 years, however long until, they make it back there again. So, these, even though they don't feel like good times, these are good times, I think, to be a Leinster supporter. And yet we'd love to lift the trophy, but getting, those of you who are lucky to actually get to go to the finals, yes, you don't want to go and watch your team lose every year, but still, it's an adventure in itself. Some of my absolute favorite memories of my whole life have been going to rugby games. A lot of it, I talked about this before, but a lot of my rugby memories are involved with my family, especially my dad, who passed away in 2018. And we used to, like, I used to be a Leinster season ticket holder, and we used to go down to Donnybrook, the RDS, and then later like the Lansdowne Road, and then later it became the Viva Stadium as well. So we used to go every second week when we had a home game. That was our thing. Myself and my dad went, and that's actually how, as an adult, I actually got to know my dad. Because honestly, growing up, I didn't know my dad at all. So I built up a friendship with my dad that I wouldn't have had only for rugby. And outside of that as well, we used to watch things like Lions tours and Ireland on the TV. We used to go to Ireland games as well. We went to the World Cup in 2007. Then, after my dad passed in 2019, the World Cup was on in Japan, which is where I was living at the time. So I got to go to a few of those games, and I went with one of my good friends as well, and we got to kind of bond over that as well. Like, he's not a big rugby fan, but he enjoyed the game that we went to together. So for me, that kind of thing has been so important in my life. And for those of you who've been lucky enough to go to those, those finals, even if in defeat, there's still going to be, I think, memories that you're going to cherish as well for the rest of your life. Yes, hopefully you get to go to one where Leinster actually do win and lift the cup. But if not, there's still going to be good memories for you. But also, again, a team doesn't make 3 finals in a row without being really, really good. And, it was just that on each of the days they met a better opponent on that occasion. And that's what we've got to say. For me, I'm not one that I never, criticize, pretty much never criticize referees, because I know they basically do the hardest job in rugby as far as I'm concerned. And, if the way I look at it is, if players and especially like the pundits that criticize them, if they performed anywhere near to the level that referees did, then we'd all be much happier. Put it that way, okay? But it was fine margins at each of those, and we came out on the wrong side. But we're still an exceptional team, and that has to be taken into consideration. So my bits here are what I'm talking about are nitpicks in terms of where I see, and again, it's just all irrational, emotional crap, right? Where I see maybe we could be better. Okay, so let's start with this whole thing that we hear a lot about, that either Leinster or Ireland playing in blue, or Ireland or Leinster playing in green. For me, that's not true. Yes, there are a lot of Leinster players in the Ireland team, but look at the players who are in the Ireland team that aren't in the Leinster team, and you can see why it's not true. Because, so let's start with, first of all, Tyke Byrne. Like, that guy is absolutely an immense player. Like, Leinster would love to have him in the back row, and somebody like him could have made a difference in one of those finals, right? He's been sensational for Ireland since he came back to Munster, and he adds so much to the Ireland team. Then you got Peter O'Mahony. That guy is just an absolute warrior, a leader. He's such a menace to oppositions. He's such a great line-out option as well. Then we got Mac Hansen on the wing over the last few seasons. Again, gives Ireland something that Leinster don't have, I feel, on that right wing. Then Calvin Nash as well this year, another guy who come in and showed what he can do, and improved the players around him as well. Then also got Bundy Aki, Ireland's best player, easily from my point of view over the last 12 months. How many player of the match awards had he won on the trot, let alone over those 12 months? And then you've got the players from the other provinces as well that are involved in the squad, that in that environment as well just lift the standards too. Okay, so it's not just the guys who regularly start for Ireland. It's the likes of your Herrings who would be in there in terms of improving the likes of Sheehan and Kelleher, and driving them on, driving their standards on. And players coming in from Ulster as well, like Ian Henderson, they're tough as nails, and the guy, he always gives his all for the shirts as well, whether he's on the bench or he's starting or wherever. And so for me, yes, there's lots of Leinster players in the Ireland team, But the players who are not from Leinster absolutely make Ireland a much, much better team than I think Leinster. And also, the other thing is it's different systems. Ireland and Leinster, they defend and attack in different ways, and that can be have a complete effect as well on the players. Players who perform really well for Ireland don't necessarily always perform well for Leinster in the same way, because maybe they have a slightly different role, or maybe the for some players, maybe the coaching environment in Ireland, the Ireland camp is better for them for whatever reason, and for other players maybe it's at Leinster that they feel more at home. But whatever it is, I don't think you can say that it's basically the same team, because I truly don't believe that is the case. But I'm going to talk about some first world problems before we get into the other stuff. So for me, the fact that Leinster have so many players in the Ireland squad, first of all, is a massive blessing, because it means that we have so many quality players, because they wouldn't be in the Ireland setup if they weren't good enough to be there, right? So having those quality players, absolutely, I wouldn't change it. But there are problems that come with that, and one of those is the fact that the playing time of those players, given that they play so many tests a year, has to be managed at the province as well, which means that Leinster rotate their team a lot more than other provinces, and that causes problems. For me, I would like to see more of these, starting Leinster players playing more often in a Leinster shirt, and not just, the odd game. I'd like to see them have like a run of games in the team where they're playing kind of week in, week out for Leinster. And with Ireland commitments, I don't know whether that's even possible in terms of what their allowed workload is. But I think that is an issue for Leinster. But again, if you take the two things, whether do I want to have all of these quality players that are, good enough to be starters for Ireland, but they have to be rested, throughout the season for Leinster, or do I want to have lesser quality players who can't make the Ireland team but can play for Leinster week in, week out? I'm going to take the first option every time, but it doesn't mean that there isn't an issue with it. It just means that maybe the benefits outweigh the disadvantages that are there with it. Okay, so next thing then is that I want to talk about is the 23 players, right? And basically what I call the first team, right? So the first team are the players, most of the players who are in the Ireland camp, and then a few others tagged onto that as well. But they never go to South Africa, and I don't understand why. Like, maybe it's to do with the fact that Leinster's, South African tour, occurs in the last 3 rounds, like 2 of the last 3 rounds. Leinster, since the URC has come about, have gone on their tour to South Africa. So maybe it's because of that, the travel involved, and the fact that Leinster are competing in 2 competitions. They don't want the first team having to travel all the way to South Africa and come back from that and have the issues involved with that. Maybe that's what it is. But for me, again, I want to see these players battle hardened in a Leinster shirt, not just in an Ireland shirt, because I know they can deliver for Ireland in tough games. I just haven't seen as much of it for them in the blue of Leinster. And of the 23 that started, the 23 that were in the squad for the game on Saturday, 6 of those players have gone on tour to South Africa over like the last 3 years, and most of them only kind of one or two appearances. I don't think any of them have gone on all three of the tours. And if we look down through the team that played, so first in the backs, the starter, there's one that's Jamie Osborne. Then in the forwards, we have Andrew Porter. I think he was one of the years he was coming back from an injury, and they needed to get him game time, so he went down. Then we have Jason Jenkins and Will Connors. So three of the pack have played in South Africa for Leinster in the URC. And then on the bench we have two more, Michael Alaltoa and Kieran Frawley. So I think Kieran Frawley played 10 so the first season that the South African teams are there, he was 10 on the South African tour. So 6 players out of 23 have gone down there. Probably the toughest assignments in the URC. You'd look at maybe now with a resurgent Munster, maybe going to Thomond Park would be one of those tough assignments, and then the others then would be basically the 2 games going to South Africa. So to have those players not, pretty much all of them not involved in that, I think is a bit of an issue. It could be to do again with the timing and just managing those workloads, etc. But for me, I would like to see more of them doing that. And again, this is just ranty stuff as well. Logically, maybe it makes no sense, but this again, this is not a place for logic. This video. Okay, so next then, and all of this stuff is, again, it's not a logical video, so it's not in any kind of logical order either. I just made a list and decided to talk about each of the things once I saw them on the list. So next is the attack. This year is not as slick as last year. I think everybody can agree with that. There's been very few games this year where that attack has really clicked into gear, and we saw Leinster cutting teams open. And I saw, just as I was getting ready for this, actually, Neighbour come out talking about it, that they haven't reduced their focus on attack this year. But whatever it is, whatever the cause is for it, nobody can argue about the fact that Leinster's attack last year looked a lot better than it does this year. So whatever it is, there's an issue around the attack in terms of players, like even at this time of the season, we're still seeing like the top end players looking like they're playing the first couple of rounds of the season, where you got guys dropping balls that you wouldn't expect to, passes going slightly behind players overrunning things, and alignments being slightly off, just getting into their getting set and stuff, just fractions slower than we'd expect, but it all kind of adds up and has a kind of a knock-on effect. So that's another thing that I've noticed, and something that hopefully can be fixed during the rest of the season in the URC. If not, it's something that they definitely need to work on for next season. Is they've got a new defense now, but they've got to get that attack back and humming again, because that was one of Leinster's points of difference. Leinster have never been like the top defensive team. It's always been about that balance. Yes, they've got a great scramble defense, and it's hard generally to score points against them, but it was always that ability to cut teams open and score in bursts in terms of their points, and we're not seeing as much of that this year as we did last year. Okay, so the next thing then is last year, and again I'm talking about the last few years rather than just focusing on this year. But last year we basically had 2 separate squads. We had the URC squad, and we had the Champions Cup squad, and there was very little movement between the two at all. and that I think really had a detrimental effect on the squad as a whole. I think it was akin to the 2005 Leinster when Woodward was the coach, and he'd already picked his test team and his test squad, and then he brought along all these other guys, like he had 50 odd players or whatever it was, and he brought along a completely separate squad, and their job was just to fill in on all those other games. There was never, in the plan at least, never any chance of them getting near the test side, because the test side was already decided, and that did not work out well. And for Leinster last year, I think same thing. It did not work out well at all for them. So definitely something that that they need to work on. For this year was a little bit better. We saw like McCarthy emerge and Osborne coming in as well, but still feels like there's not enough players coming through compared to if we look at first of all, like La Rochelle, right? La Rochelle, between the 2 years that they won, so the 2022 final and the 2023 final, they had 8 different players in their squad between those 2 games against Leinster. Leinster had 3 different players, and one of the players who was missing was Johnny Sexton, who was injured for the basically from January to the end of the club season, and then came back for the Rugby World Cup. So we're not seeing as much in terms of opportunities, I think, for players to get into that first team. And again, it comes down to the fact that there's so many Ireland internationals in there, camp players, that it's really hard for a player to come through. And first of all, it's hard anyway for young players to break into professional teams. But when you think about the fact that if let's say a young hooker had to was coming up and they're trying to break into the team, well, not only to get onto the bench do they have to get by Ireland's second choice hooker. To get a start, they've got to go beyond Ireland's first choice hooker. So it's that kind of thing I'm talking about, where it's maybe more difficult for players to get into that team where they're surrounded by the more experienced players, and instead they're put into the URC team where they're still around good players, but they're not around the best players at the province, in terms of playing alongside them. And that I think that maybe stymies development of some of their players as well. So but I don't know what you do, because you can't just go, okay, well, we don't want these Ireland internationals anymore, we're going to bring all new players in. But there has to be some kind of mechanism there to be able to give more opportunities for players to get in there and compete. And if they're good enough, then if it means that someone who's maybe a starter for Ireland gets left out of the starting team or out of the 23 because this player is in better form at the moment, well then I think that's the way it should go. But again, this is just ranty stuff. Okay, next thing then I want to talk about is on that as well, that the fact that the squad feels stale at the minute. We talked about La Rochelle having 8 players between those 2 years, 2022 and 23, and Leinster only having 3 players different. Well, this year they only had 4 different players. And have a look at the team again. So Jordan Larmour on the wing, I think Jimmy O'Brien was there. Jamie Osborne into the midfield, and it was Ringrose who was starting there. Then In the forwards, Joe McCarthy I think it was Maloney, was among the three locks in the squad. Obviously, there's a difference between who's starting and who's on the bench and stuff. But then the other one was Will Connors coming in. So he came in instead of, I think, like in the totality of it, he's obviously starting instead of Van der Fleer, but I think he's in the squad instead of Charlie Natai, because it was 5-3 split on the bench last year. And then the other player, I'm trying to think, I know it was 4. Joe McCarthy, of course. Joe McCarthy emerged and come in to the team as well. So those are just 4 players difference between the 2 seasons, and it feels like with we talk about all the time about this conveyor belt that Leinster have, etc., but it feels like the conveyor belt is kind of jammed. We look at the players again who come in, like Joe McCarthy, genuine talent who emerged. Jamie Osborne has been around the squad for a fair time. Will Connors has been there for ages, but he feels like a new player because he's had such injury worries. But then, like the rest of the squad, have been there. Like Jordan Larmour. He's one actually. He's the other one, I think, different from last year. He came onto the wing because Jimmy O'Brien was there last year. So, but again, he's been around a long time in the squad as well. So we're not seeing, players coming in and bringing that excitement that new players, tend to do to a squad, and kind of just freshen things up, and make players not be as complacent about things as well. So that's something that I'd like to see somehow being addressed. But again, this is not a video for giving practical solutions to things. Next then to talk about is the impact from the bench. So you look at the Leinster bench, like for the game on Saturday, you have Kelleher, Healy, Alatoa, Ryan, Conan, McGrath, Frawley, Van der Fleer. You look at that and you just think quality. But the impact from the bench in games like this is not what it should be. Like you'd expect, because looking at that bench, anyone would love to have a bench of that quality, players of similar quality that they could bring on, for the last 30 odd minutes or whatever it is of the game. But these guys, they came on in 3 finals in a row, and Leinster weren't able to get over the top and win any of those finals. So in tight games, they don't seem to have the impact that you would hope for, that you would expect from players of that quality coming in, and that's something that hopefully Nienaber, it was just his first season there now, so hopefully next year whatever's going on with that, those guys can get in there and sort out what is actually happening in terms of the coordinated impact of players, because we see players coming on and doing really good things, but it doesn't lead to a really good outcome. Now, where these players do have impact is if we go back to the last couple of years, the semi-finals against Toulouse, when Leinster are ahead in the game and the opposition are chasing, bringing on this bench just absolutely seals the deal in a case like that, because these guys are, for whatever reason, really good in that scenario where the opposition are chasing the game. They absolutely tear them a new one, and they exploit almost every opportunity that they get and just completely kill the game off. But when it's the opposite way and Leinster have to chase the game, the impact is not as noticeable in terms of a positive outcome for Leinster. So again, no solutions here. It's just ranty stuff. But that's just something that I've noticed. Next, then, kind of tied in with that as well, is experience of winning tight games for Leinster. Like a lot of these guys who are in like the first team don't actually have that much experience in terms of winning tight games for Leinster, simply because this team against most other teams win by 2 scores or more, like 15, 20, 30, whatever, 40 points, right? They're winning. So they don't actually get that much practice in a Leinster jersey of having tight games. If you look at this team in particular, I think the only tight games they've had in the Champions Cup over the last 3 seasons have been the 3 finals. So, and they didn't win any of them. So they don't have that kind of bank of knowledge, that experience to go to. They do have it for Ireland, but again, I think Ireland is different because of those different personnel who are there, and those are players for the most part who actually have more experience than the Leinster players in terms of winning tight games. I think that's something that they add to Ireland when they combine with the Leinster players. So it's something again in terms of Leinster that I don't know how you fix that, because you obviously don't want kind of these players every time they play to be it going down to the wire in every game. But there's some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like maybe a mental block or something in terms of when it gets to a certain point in the game, that the rational way they approach things, in terms of being positive, attacking, doesn't seem to come through for them. We saw it as well in the semi-final against Northampton, where they went into the shell and they almost lost the game because they were trying to defend the lead. But then, and the problem is it's not just one thing either, because like last year against or like last year and the year before against La Rochelle, kind of different as well. Like they were defending a lead and then suddenly they're behind and have to come back and try and get it, and that mental switch didn't happen for them. And they did get close to the line last year, but then obviously there was an infringement and the game was lost there, but it's still a loss. You can't just say, well, if that was different then they would have won, because I talk about so much that it doesn't work like that. But then this year, they were trying to be positive. They were kicking to the corner. They were trying to get that score that would put them ahead, because the whole game Leinster were chasing to lose. And I still think that this Leinster team looks so much better when they get themselves ahead early and the opposition have to chase them, because they're just so good at that. When the opposition are taking maybe a little bit extra risk, Leinster in there, we saw it, like intercepts, etc., or just putting pressure on at the breakdown, winning turnovers and creating tries from that. They're so good at that. But then when the shoe's on the other foot and Leinster have to press themselves in a tight game like that, it seems like things don't quite click for them. And again, if one of those chances had have materialized for them, if Frawley's kick had gone over the bar, there to death, then we would have been waxing lyrical about how brilliant this Leinster team are. But those are the fine margins. Again, this is just a rant video. But that's something as well for me, is, that difference between chasing the game and being chased is very different for this Leinster team. Also, something that I kind of noticed is there seems to be like a lack of leadership in the Leinster squad. And something, especially this year, something that kind of set alarm bells ringing for me. Like for other people, maybe it's not a big issue, but for me, it was the fact that we announced co-captains. Because co-captains to me kind of, stinks a little bit of trying to keep maybe two players happy or two camps happy, two little cliques or whatever happy by saying, well, you're the captain and you're the captain. But for me, I think you should have one captain, and that's the guy in charge. And you can have like two vice captains or leadership group, however big that you want, right? But I'd rather see one player who go, this guy's the captain, he's going to lead and you guys follow. But when it's two captains, we saw earlier on in the season as well, where referee was like refusing to speak to James Ryan in the early rounds as well. And that was like straight away from me, he was like, oh, that's not good. And then obviously both of the co-captains as well were out, for much of this run into the season as well. So then we had Doris as captain as well. And, I think Doris is a decent guy that maybe is going to be a decent captain in the future. But it's just that whole thing of he doesn't, in terms of experience of captaining the team, it's, we had Johnny Sexton for so long, and we had Johnny Sexton, two seasons ago, like in the first game against La Rochelle as captain, and that still didn't work out for us. Didn't have him last year, obviously, and we didn't have him this year either. But it's just one of those things where I think that the leadership in over those 3 seasons, the leadership in the Leinster squad has deteriorated. They're still all fine players, and I'd love for one of them to be the captain of the squad and be the captain for a long time. But I don't agree with this whole thing of we're going to have co-captains, and it's just maybe just a personal thing. Other people might say, oh, it's fine. But when I think of co-captains, I think of teams who have had kind of struggles in terms of being able to perform, when it really mattered. So I'm thinking about Scotland have co-captains, and Scotland are a fine team. They're an amazing team with brilliant players, but decision making in tight games sometimes goes against them, and just that, again, that mental thing for them, their mental thing I think is different than Leinster's, but it's kind of akin to it in that when it really is a big game, they seem to go missing. And for Leinster, I think the leadership in big games kind of goes missing as well. I'm not saying that necessarily the players themselves don't perform well. I'm just saying that in terms of leadership, maybe they don't perform well. But again, that's just my opinion. Next then, so I'm going to briefly talk about kicking to the corner or taking the points. So for me, it's one of these ones where, I don't mind the decision to kick to the corner because it shows the ambition of, trying to get that score to basically put themselves ahead and change the dynamic of the game. I think that's what they're trying to do, rather than continually just scoring penalties and equalising basically against Toulouse. They wanted to get themselves ahead, so I applaud that positivity there. And as well, if we've taken the points, it doesn't mean that we're guaranteed that we would have won either. A lot of people say, oh well, you kicked to the corner 3 times, if that had gone over, you would have got 9 points and therefore you would have won. But again, it doesn't really work out like that, because you kick to the corner and you score 3 points instead of whatever it is, getting held up or getting forced into touch. And then suddenly the point where the game restarts is completely different, because it's restarting on the halfway line with, Toulouse kicking back to Leinster, and instead of maybe them having a goal line dropout or dropout for the 22 or line out on their whatever it is, right? So then straight away, then everything that happened after that point can't happen exactly the same. So therefore, the scoreline is not going to be wherever it was plus those 3 points for Leinster. So for me, that argument doesn't really sit well with me, because scoring those 3 points completely changes Toulouse's mindset as well, in terms of how they're going to approach the next phase of the game, and completely changes the outcome of the game, and doesn't necessarily mean that the Leinster are going to win. So for me, the kicking to the corner, sometimes I'll have a problem with it where teams don't have any points on the board, and they're not taking the points available. But it was a very close game, and there were chances to get over and kind of break that mold, and break the cycle that was happening where Toulouse go ahead, we peg them back, they go ahead, we peg them back, they go ahead, we peg them back. It was basically, no, we're going to try and leapfrog them, and now they've got to come back. And now we'll see, because again, as I said before, Leinster, ahead being chased are a very different animal than the opposite way around. So I can see that, so I won't criticize them for kicking to the corner so much, because I think it was probably the right decision. It didn't come off, and sometimes that happens, but honestly, I think it was probably the right thing to do. Okay, so we're almost at the end. I've just got a few more things to talk about, and we'll talk about then what my theory about Leo is as well at the end. So the next thing then, having said all that about the Leinster team now, I feel like honestly, in terms of getting over whatever is there, the malaise that's there, or the mental block, or whatever it is, I feel like the solution has to come from outside of the province. And kind of like the way Rocky Elsom way back in 2008, 2009 came in and helped Leinster to win the Heineken Cup. Him coming in, it was again a really talented side that couldn't quite get there. And then he came in, and it was just one season, but completely changed the things. And then suddenly that group of players, they got that win, and that, even for not just that group of players, but for players that come after as well, completely changed their mindset, and put that kind of intellectual property, if you like, of being able to deliver in a final and win the final, put it there, and that then helped subsequent teams as well to look back and say, well, we've done it before, or some of the players that are here have done it before. And I think that helps a lot. This Leinster team has some players who've done it before as well, but there is a big, there is a sizable contingent of them, especially as years go by and newer players are coming in, who don't have that as well to go back on. And most of these players do have that experience of now losing 3 finals in a row. Of the 23, you're probably talking about at least 16 or 17 of those players have lost at least 2 finals right on the track, and probably more, because we talked about very little turnover between the years for them there. So I feel like maybe next year now, with like the likes of Barrett coming in, and then they got Sneyman coming too, like those guys coming from outside of the province, maybe that's going to be the final piece of the puzzle for them. Or maybe next year they go out in the round of 16. Who knows, right? But that's what I kind of think of that. Now, let's get on to my theory about Leo. And again, this is complete speculation. There's no hint of any kind of fact behind this. But I think that Leo, over the last few years, has wanted one more Champions Cup before he steps down. I think that's basically in the back of his mind has been his plan that I'm gonna, we're gonna we're gonna get that 5th star, and then I can say, okay, it's kind of mission complete for me. It's time for somebody else now to take the reins, and I'm now happy to step back, and maybe he would go, maybe go back to his old club Leicester, and see that as a project that would kind of infuse him again with with enthusiasm to kind of start turning them around and building them back up. But again, it's just speculation on my part but it feels that way, because it feels like for last year and this year, the focus, and it goes back to a lot of points that I made about, the kind of less, players coming in from the conveyor belt, etc. And the fact that last year we had 2 separate teams, it was obviously focused on trying to keep the first team, completely available for Champions Cup. That it was basically he was looking at as everything is on getting it done this season, and then when it came to this season again, it felt like everything again focused on let's get it done this season, and it feels like there's less of a focus on kind of the future in the province. And again, it's just speculation on my part, but that's kind of the feeling that I've gotten in terms of just watching every single Leinster game for whatever many, I don't know how many years now. I've watched all of the games, but it's a long time. But the other thing is, then I'm wondering if that was true, then let's say Leinster went on and they lifted the URC title this year, because they haven't won a trophy in 3 years. Would that then be enough for him to say, okay, well, now we've lifted the trophy, now I can step back? So for me, it's going to be interesting to see, first of all, how Leinster do in the playoffs, because they haven't made it easy for themselves this year. And if they get to the final, can they win the final? And then what happens after the final, right? Or is Leo now thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get Barrett and Snyman and etc. in next year, and next year we're definitely going to do it. So we'll see with that. But again, that's just some kind of weird gut feeling that I have about it. But for me, in terms of like when we talked about before, Leo stepping down or whatever, I will say one thing, with what Leo Cullen has given to Leinster and what he's done for the province, he's absolutely more than 10 times over, he's earned the right to choose when he goes. I don't want to see him getting pushed out the door. I think it should be his choice to step down when he wants to, because he's delivered so much to Leinster over the years. We wouldn't have anywhere near the success that we have had without him being at the helm. So just because we've fallen short for a few seasons doesn't mean that suddenly everything that's gone before should be forgotten. So from my point of view, at least, Leo should decide when he goes and nobody else. Okay, so that's basically it. That's the irrational video done. It's out of my system now. I don't need to worry about all that crap anymore. I can get back to my regular type of videos. URC preview will be tomorrow, and then next week we're going to have the rational video that I promised about Leinster as well.